The history of American neoconservatism is often told as if it simply appeared in the 1970s. Disillusioned liberals who turned right in reaction to the New Left, the counterculture, and the perceived decline of American power. That version is sufficient at first glance, but leaves out the deeper story. Neoconservatism's roots run into the factional infighting of the far left in the 1930s. Many of its key architects began their lives as Trotskyists.
Quasi-Marxists, anti-Stalinist Marxists, pro-Stalinist Marxists. My father was a Trotskyite. Much has been made of this afterwards. I don't know that it was quite as big a deal. I mean, he had fond memories of it, and he thought he learned a lot having to argue with Stalinists.
They carried with them the habits, worldview, and methods of revolutionary politics long after they had abandoned socialism itself. Neoconservatives did not become conservatives in the traditional sense. They did not simply turn from radicalism to preserving the past. Instead, they kept their revolutionary mindset, but switched the content of their politics. They still believed in a moral struggle between good and evil, the need for an elite vanguard to steer society and history, and in the legitimacy of using decisive force to make the world conform to a political vision. They simply replaced the proletarian revolution with the global spread of liberal democracy under American leadership. But before we begin, I will ask you to like and subscribe, as this helps the channel. Now, let's begin. In 1930s New York City, specifically City College of New York, was a hotbed of political radicalism. Its cafeteria was famously divided between Alcove No. 1 and Alcove No. 2. Alcove No. 1 was the home of the young communists loyal to Stalin. Alcove No. 2 was the territory of Trotskyists, anti-Stalinist Marxists, and other dissident leftists. Figures like Irving Kristol, later known as the godfather of neoconservatism, Norma Potteritz, who would edit Commentary magazine for decades, moved in the same intellectual circles. The habit of seeing politics as a battle between absolute right and absolute wrong was set early and never left them. The move away from revolutionary socialism came in steps. A central figure in this transition was Max Shachtman. Once one of Trotsky's closest allies in exile, Shachtman broke with him in 1940 over the question of the Soviet Union. Trotsky still called it a degenerated workers' state that should be defended against capitalism. Shachtman argued that it was something new, bureaucratic collectivism, and just as oppressive as fascism. This break opened the door to a new political position, opposing both Moscow and right-wing authoritarianism, and eventually supporting US power as a counterweight to totalitarianism. By the 1950s and 60s, Shachtman had moved firmly into the anti-communist wing of the Democratic Party. With strong ties to organised labour, through the AFL-CIO, he believed the United States, despite its flaws, could be an instrument for spreading democracy abroad. The Shachtmanite network became a bridge between the old Trotskyist world and the emerging Cold War liberalism. They still thought in terms of global moral struggle and the need for an active intervention, but they now aimed those instincts at containing and rolling back communism through American strength. Many of the young intellectuals who passed through this world would later drift further right, as many in the Democratic Party embraced the anti-war movement and a less interventionist foreign policy. We cannot begin to start to unravel this web without mentioning the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was founded in West Berlin in 1950, which subsidized intellectual publications against communism from the left. It had publications and writers all over the world, but a secret was revealed in the mid-60s. It was founded and funded by the CIA, and in that founding conference in Berlin, Irving Kristol was present, and shows how, even in these early stages, Irving Kristol was a CIA asset. It also shows as well the CIA's efforts to divide the left wing, such as Jay Lovestone, who was a CIA asset, in the AFL-CIO, America's largest trade union, feeding them intelligence and using funds from the labour union to fund anti-communist movements in South America. Though all of this is important foundations, the 1960s was the breaking point and the rise of neoconservatism. The rise of the new left, increasingly anti-Vietnam, anti-military and anti-Israel left, drove a wedge between the anti-communist liberals and the rest of the left. For Jewish intellectuals like Potteritz and Kristol, the growing hostility to Israel in radical circles was not just a policy disagreement, but to them a sign of moral bankruptcy. The hostile stance taken against Israel by the Soviet Union in supporting Israel's Arab neighbours in their wars against them, and the forwarding of UN General Assembly Resolution 3379 that declared Zionism is a form of racism, only cemented the thinking that the Soviet Union should be destroyed at all costs, as an existential threat to Israel. With Daniel Patrick Moynihan, at the time US UN ambassador, gave a famous speech against this resolution.
The United States rises to declare before the General Assembly of the United Nations and before the world that it does not acknowledge, it will not abide by, it will never acquiesce in this infamous act. Historians will do that for us, and it is sufficient for the moment only to note one foreboding fact. A great evil has been loosed upon the world.
Crystal, by then the founder of the Public Interest, which had contributors like James Burnham and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who I have mentioned, launched broad critiques of the Great Society welfare programs, arguing they failed because they misunderstood human nature. Potteritz turned commentary into a platform for cultural counterattack, accusing the New Left of undermining American values. It was during this period that socialist writer Michael Harrington used neoconservative as a term of abuse for liberals moving rightward. Crystal, however, embraced it, calling a neoconservative a liberal who has been mugged by reality. The phrase stuck. But what reality was Crystal mugged by? The Yom Kippur War, in which Israel was nearly destroyed, and he saw the left's ambivalence and at times cheering on of Israel's enemies. He also saw the United States did not intervene when Israel was threatened. At this point, both Potteritz and Crystal did not call themselves Zionists. They didn't need to question this, as the US had supported Israel unconditionally from its inception. But when the war broke out, they feared the continued existence of their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and Jews in general. Just as in 2023, in 1973, there were anti-Israel protests on American universities, and just as in 2023, American Jews abandoned the left. In 2023 it was Bill Ackman, in 1973 it was Irving Kristol. Trotsky's idea of the permanent revolution held that the struggle for socialism must be constant and global, led by an organised vanguard willing to act decisively. The neoconservatives kept the form but changed the content. Permanent revolution became permanent global mission for the spread of democracy, free markets and Western values, led by the United States. By the Reagan era, neoconservatives had embedded themselves in Republican politics. They were not cautious realists in the Henry Kissinger mould. They believed American power should be used proactively to shape the world, not simply to defend national borders. Crystal and Potteritz, and in the Bush administration, David Frum, provided the cultural and intellectual firepower. Others like Richard Pearl, Elliot Abrams, Gene Kirkpatrick, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan provided the policy expertise. The network of think tanks, journals, and political appointments they built up over nearly 50 years gave them a lasting influence. Paul Wufilis illustrates how the mindset carried forward into a new generation. He was not a Trotskyist himself, but he was mentored by figures shaped by that tradition. At the University of Chicago, under Albert Wohlsletter, Wolfowitz absorbed the belief that American military superiority was the key to preventing a disaster. As a Pentagon official, and later as a key architect of the Iraq War, Wolfowitz applied the neoconservative faith in decisive action. The 2003 invasion of Iraq was meant to be the trigger for a democratic transformation of the Middle East. The same strategic optimism Trotsky once applied to revolutionary uprisings. Like many revolutions, it underestimated the complexity of societies it sought to change. The post-9/11 years were the high watermark of neoconservative power. The Bush administration's freedom agenda, the belief that one decisive intervention could reshape a region, proved as flawed as the old Marxist dream that one successful revolution could spark a global wave. By the 2010s, neoconservatism was less dominant, challenged by both anti-interventionist conservatives and a left wary of foreign entanglements. Yet its influence lingers in the bipartisan instinct to see America in power as a force for shaping the world. Path from Trotsky to Washington DC is not as strange as it first seems. In both cases, the actors believed that they were on the right side of history. They saw politics as a moral battle, they believed in an elite vanguard, and they embraced the use of power to enforce their vision. They changed their flags but not their playbook. The same habits forged in Alcove No. 2 survived the journey from revolutionary socialism to American interventionism. I will finish with this. With the collapse of neoconservatism as near universal unpopularity, has the idea or its actors truly gone away? Or is it that they have put the finger to the sky and seen where the wind was blowing, and realised the need to adapt and change their playbook in order to survive in a world that didn't like them anymore? If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing, as this helps the channel. Look in the description for my other socials and sources. I've been History with Matt, thank you very much for watching.